Hurry up, you don't want to be late for school. Sound familiar? Welcome to the Blended Learning Series, the Student Experience. My name is Martha Thibodeau. I'm your host for today. I'm an MLTI ambassador with the Maine Department of Education. In this video, we will look at blended learning from the viewpoint of the student. We'll be joining 5th and 6th graders as they work on different parts of their annual Living History Museum project. First, we'll go to social studies, then math class, and then finally we'll end the day in ELA. Oh, there's the bell. We're off to social studies class. As we walk into class, we notice Mrs. Jones writing on the board. Looks like our list of things to do for today. And there's a clock on the board, so she's probably going to be keeping track of time for each part of this whole group rotation. Sure enough, she directs us to an online document where we'll keep track of all our work for this part of the project. The first part of the project is reflect. We'll do this on our own. The left-hand side of the document gives us the questions. The right-hand side of the document gives us some icons, and the icons tell us what types of answers are acceptable in this case. And we can choose any one that we want. So in this case, the icons tell us that we could do a video recording, maybe using QuickTime. We could write something using Google Slides, Google Docs, or any online writing tool. Or we could take a quick audio capture for our reflections. Now she's asking us to move on to the Explore section. In the Explore section, looks like she's given us some examples and some non-examples of what she's asked us to look at. In this case, what we're looking for is we are looking at examples and non-examples of criteria for our project. And as you can see, she's given us some additional ways of capturing what we learned. This time we can do a Venn diagram, we can do some kind of concept mapping, we can write again, or we could actually do a sketch note. I think I'll choose Venn diagram for this. Now we move on to the discussion part. In the discussion part, she's given us lots of ways to do this. We're doing it with partners. Some of us are 3 in a group. And let's see, we're going to look at what we all found in our examples and non-examples and how we decided to write down what we knew. And now we have to look at reflecting on what we learned based on those samples from our classmates. So again, we have a sketch note. Ooh, this time she said we could do a song or a poem. Concept map, Venn diagram, audio file, video file, and this time she's letting us do it as a journal entry as well. I think I'll do a journal entry on this one. And now we're into Create. In Create, there's only one way that we can do this. We have to do this in writing on this particular form that she gave us. We're going to be doing small groups and looking at 3 different success criteria from all the ones that we saw in the different examples and non-examples that we discussed earlier. And we'll look at each level of mastery and see how they look different. I like this. It's like creating my own rubric for my project. I get to put in what I think is important and what I think will help me work better on the project. And finally, she's handing us an exit ticket because it's almost the end of the class, and we're doing a little bit more reflecting here individually, just writing on the actual piece of paper that she gave us. We got a lot accomplished during this class. Well, there's the bell for math. I wonder what Mrs. White has planned for us today. I'm going to head down to my math class. Here we are in math class, and it looks like we're going to be analyzing and creating graphs for our project. As I come into math class, I notice that there's a group set up near the whiteboard, one set up with tablets, and another set up with art supplies. Mrs. White lets us know we're working on the graphs that will go with our Living History Museum project. She wants us to be able to figure out what makes a graph useful and how graphs can be skewed. I wonder what that word means. I bet I'll find out today. My group starts with a meeting with Mrs. White. She gives us some questions to help us start our fishbowl discussion on misleading graphs. Oh, that's what skewed means. We can choose whether we are observers or discussion participants for the first round. I'm going to be a discussion participant. The observers will let us know if we get off task, and at the end of the discussion, they'll give us insight into our group dynamics. We've done this a few times before, and it really helps me stay focused when I know someone is keeping an eye on what I'm doing and what I'm saying, and will give me feedback right away. After our 10-minute discussion, we change roles and then redo the process. Mrs. White gives the participants a new set of graphs to look at, and then we give them feedback on things like eye contact, active listening skills, vocabulary, and being on task, just to name a few. Oh, off to the next station. Now we're at the online station. Here we have a playlist of resources. And the playlist includes things like videos, text, and interactive websites. And we can use any or all of them to make sure we have the information we need to make the best graphs we can. I think I'm going to look at Desmos. It's an interactive graphing website. And I'm going to look through some of their help menus to see how I can enter data and make a graph on it. Because I think I want my graph to look really nice. And what I'm seeing from Desmos, that can do that. So that's what I'm going to be working on. Wow, Mrs. White says it's already time to move to the next station. Time flies. We're now at the table with the art supplies, the offline station. I really liked Desmos, so I want to create my graph online using that website. But I have a lot of things that I need to create that explain my graph or that explain other parts of my presentation in my Living History Museum project. So I am going to work on my presentation that will accompany my graph. Later in advisory time, or maybe even in another math class in my online session, I'll go to the Desmos website and work on my graph with my data from my research that we're going to be doing in ELA. I might even work on it at home. Whoop. Well, off to lunch and then ELA. See you there. Here we are in ELA, and Mr. White is giving us research with choice boards. As a matter of fact, he's giving us so much choice that it looks a little confusing all at once. But let's take a look at what he's actually asking us to do. He's giving us a tic-tac-toe board. Everybody's familiar with tic-tac-toe. We get to look at these 9 areas, 9 actionable items, and decide which one we want to do. And from that, we build out and make a tic-tac-toe. Now, I'm sure if we gave our teacher reasons for why we were going to do 3, but they didn't happen to line up, he would probably let us do that. But for right now, I want to challenge myself to actually make a tic-tac-toe. So I've looked over the 9 items, and the one that I want to do the most just happens to be the middle square, using Wordle with quotes from my person. I'm a big fan of using quotes in a lot of different things, and Wordle is so much fun with the colors and the size of the text and everything. So I'll be really interested to see what words my person uses most often. Now, since I chose the middle square, I have a lot of different options on which way to go. The one I think I really want to do next is to fill in a job application. I think that could be a really creative outlet. I'm not very good at drawing and things, so I like the words better. So here we have to fill out a job application, applying for the career that made them famous. That's going to be interesting. Okay, so I'm doing that one. Once I choose that particular one, if I want to make a tic-tac-toe, there's only one other place I can go. If I don't like that particular one, I may have to change my job application piece. But let's see what it is. So this one is creating a table of contents that highlights all the important events from your person's life. Well, I love table of contents and indexes and things like that can be numbered and ordered and organized, so I like that idea. Okay, so those are my 3, and I did make tic-tac-toe. So I'm really excited about getting started on this, and I'm going to go off to work. I'm going to start with the Wordle first because I think that'll give me some idea for words I can use in my other 2 parts of this. So I'm really excited about that. Thanks for joining me today in my blended learning classes. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Let's hear from Dr. Catlin Tucker, one of the authors of The Shift to Student-Led, Reimagining Classroom Workflows with UDL and Blended Learning.
And there are many different blended learning models, and each model gives students different degrees of control over these elements of their learning. And when I work with teachers, I am very honest about the fact that at the very heart of blended learning, what is happening is that the control in the classroom is shifting from the teacher to the learner. And for a lot of educators, that's really scary, right? Because we put the learners in charge. It's a totally unfamiliar dynamic for most of us. But what I want to do is move away from how I started teaching, this very kind of linear approach where I came up with the objectives, I decided how we were going to practice, I figured out what assessments were going to look like, I graded work, and I gave it back to students. In that very traditional model, learners are relegated to a passive role. And I want them to be super engaged in every part of the work we do in our classroom. And there's so much talk, as Maria said earlier, about this idea of personalizing learning. But I have come to believe that we cannot personalize learning for kids unless we are willing to partner with them. Our learners have to be a partner in this whole experience that is school. So for me, I want learners to be active agents figuring out what their learning objectives should be. What are my academic and personal goals? What is it that I need from the teacher to develop very specific skill sets? And in this partnership, my job as the educator shifts as well. I am more focused on building learning experiences where kids make key decisions, where they make the meaning, and ultimately that allows me to shift into more of this coaching role, where I am explaining why we're doing this, but I'm also helping kids to really fine-tune their skills. Too often, kids come into classrooms and they get assignments and teachers will tell them how to go about completing something, and then it's left to the student to actually do it. And my job is to support the doing, to support the process, and blended learning has really allowed me the time and space to do more of that in my classroom.
Choice boards are great because choice is a great motivator. And we all know not one learning activity is going to appeal to all students. Basically, it gives them a higher degree of control over pace and path of their learning. And so there's lots of ways to design them. And I get into this in workshops with teachers all the time. I'm like, do you want to create a standard aligned choice board where each column aligns with a standard and you're giving learners 3 different ways to play with that standard, practice that standard, engage with that standard or skill? Do you want to do a thematic? Maybe you're like an elementary teacher and you're like, gosh, I wish I was doing more with science. I don't feel like science is getting the fair share of airtime in comparison to ELA and math. So maybe you create a cool science choice board. You can have a strategy specific choice board, like a reading strategies choice board, which is something you could use repeatedly throughout the course of the year after you've onboarded kids to a collection of reading strategies. Each time they sit down with a book or a chapter or an article, choose a strategy you feel would be best for you to spend some more time on. When I'm coaching a new teacher, it's like, have you had a conversation with your students about expectations, what we're going to do in here, what we're not going to do? Have you had a conversation about a sequence of appropriate consequences in an environment where they're going to be driving the learning? Are you starting to build in some reflective pieces into this process? Do you understand the mechanics of designing and facilitating in this way? When I coach a teacher who's been doing it, then we get to start to layer in these other more nuanced parts of design where it's like, okay, where is the student agency? Where do students get to make a choice about what they learn, how they learn, what they create to demonstrate their learning? What does that look like in terms of instruction, models, scaffolds, the level of academic rigor and complexity? Where in this like station rotation or this playlist are kids really controlling the pace of learning? I'll work with teachers who are like, oh, I love playlists. I use them all the time. There's like a due date for every learning activity. And I'm kind of like, there's no self-pacing if you have a due date for every single thing on this playlist. So for me, it's about taking the mechanics and really starting to weave in what makes blended learning so special, that true shift in control from teacher to learner, because you can be using the models and still have a lot of teacher control. What we want to start to do is to trust learners to assume more control. And ironically, part of that process is embracing a bit of a partnership model. So when I work with those teachers, I'm like, what metacognitive skill building are you doing to help these students become more aware of their learning?
I'll see you next time for Blended Learning Teacher Workflows. Goodbye from the MLTI ambassadors. Please reach out with questions, martha.thibodeau@maine.gov.